Evil in the lives of many people, and the increased stress that it has caused is a very normal response. High levels of stress impacts people's physical health, how they feel, and how they think. To help manage stress during this pandemic, it is important to stay up to date with credible sources of information about how to keep yourself and your family safe, maintain connections with family and friends while remembering to observe social and physical distancing. Practice relaxation techniques like deep breathing, yoga, meditation, stretching, and relaxing visual imagery. Focus on positive aspects of your life and any new opportunities that this situation is bringing to you. Engage in physical activity, even in your home. This helps to boost mood and reduce levels of stress. Stress levels can be managed by having a problem-solving approach, by managing the things that you can manage, and by adopting a positive attitude about your capabilities. This message is brought to you by the St. Kitts Mental Health Association.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the expert body on coronavirus, has released guidance for general public and healthcare professionals on the symptoms of the virus. A person could be at risk if they have any or all of the following: fever and symptoms of lower respiratory illness, such as coughing or difficulty breathing after traveling to areas with positive cases, or having close contact with someone who is ill and is now under investigation for the virus in the past 2 weeks. Fever or symptoms of lower respiratory illness after having close contact in the past 2 weeks with someone who has been confirmed to have the virus. The CDC defines close contact as being within about 6 feet 1.8 meters or within the room or care area of a person with the coronavirus for a prolonged period without appropriate protective clothing, or having direct contact with the infectious secretions of a person with the virus without protective clothing. Coronaviruses are particularly dangerous for people who have weaker immune systems, like young children and older adults. To protect yourself from the virus, try to avoid contact with people who display symptoms similar to those of pneumonia or the common cold, like coughing or a runny nose. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth with unwashed hands. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water and scrub for at least 20 seconds. Use alcohol-based hand sanitizer when possible. Be careful when handling pets. The only current treatment for coronavirus being offered is supportive in nature. If you notice any of these symptoms and conditions, please contact your nearest professional healthcare setup. Help spread this information to everyone.
Hi, I'm Carla Berridge. Join me weekdays at 7 p.m. for ZIZ's evening newscast. We'll let you know what's happening in your community.
It's the ZIZ mobile app, the newest way to get the latest on what's happening locally, regionally, and internationally. Say goodbye to newspaper clutter and hello to updated classifieds on our radio market. Whether you're streaming your favorite local TV or radio shows or catching up on memorable moments in sports and entertainment, the ZIZ mobile app offers this and so much more. Always on the go? Get the ZIZ mobile app today. Visit the App Store on your smartphone or tablet and search for ZIZ News to download the app free of cost. ZIZ Online, reaching you wherever you are.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Dwayne Archibald, Head of Emergency Room at Joseph and France Hospital. Novel coronavirus has been topic of conversation globally and of course in St. Kitts and Nevis. Basically, the word novel in coronavirus identifies that this is something new to the human being. In preparation of COVID-19 in St. Kitts and Nevis, we have to be able to identify the symptoms. These symptoms may include fever for a prolonged period of time, coughing for a prolonged period of time, shortness of breath, or any respiratory type symptoms. In addition, for prevention, we should avoid holding hands, shaking hands, sharing forks, knives, spoons, and even cups. So consider avoiding touching one's face, nose, mouth, eyes. So to avoid self-contamination, that is touching the face, we are advised to use alcohol-based hand sanitizers. Now these alcohol-based hand sanitizers should have at least 60 to 70% alcohol in it. We should also consider washing our hands thoroughly when handling babies before and after, also in the case of the sick and the elderly. So when I speak of sick people, I refer to elderly over 60, I refer to people with hypertension, diabetes, kidney compromise or kidney failure. Hand hygiene is important in cooking. We should wash our hands thoroughly before and after handling raw meat. Cooking boards should be separate for raw food and cooked food. And of course, the raw meat should be cooked thoroughly. For the pet owners, they should also consider washing their hands before and after dealing with pets. The virus can get on any other inanimate objects such as doorknobs, computer screens, computer keyboards, and we should consider wiping those down with Lysol or Clorox. Let us try to build our immune system. Exercise, rest, vitamins, vitamin C especially, also fruits and vegetables, and hydration, drinking lots and lots of water. There is a lot of misleading information being spread about the COVID-19, rumors. So what we do suggest is that you follow up with the Ministry of Health in terms of their Facebook page. Also, there's information that's readily available from WHO, World Health Organization, or from Caribbean Public Health Agency. So for further information on COVID-19, we can visit the social media outlets or social media pages of the Ministry of Health through the St. Kitts Health Promotion Unit on Facebook, on Instagram, and also on YouTube. Or we can just call
is on.
Good afternoon and welcome to the National Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 Daily Briefing for the 14th of May 2020. I am Lesroy Williams. Thank you very much for joining us once again for this daily briefing, where we continue to update you on what is happening in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is creating a lot of social, political, and economic havoc all around the world. If you are joining us via television or radio or social media, we thank you for being with us today. I want to recognize in our presence the Honorable Attorney General and the Chair of the Disaster Mitigation Council, the Honorable Vincent Byron. Today we have quite a number of senior government officials that will be addressing you, from the Ministry of Sport, Youth and Culture, from the Ministry of Justice, Legal Affairs and Communication. We'll have, of course, the police report, the report from the Health Emergency Operations Center, and the report from the National Emergency Operations Center, and we'll entertain your questions. To start the ball rolling, I would invite to the podium Ms. Diana Francis, who is the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal Affairs, and Communications to address us. Ms. Francis.
Good afternoon, everyone here and also those in the viewing and listening public. My name is Diana Francis, and I'm the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal Affairs, and Communications. The ministry encompasses 11 departments, namely the Attorney General Chambers, Parliament, High Court, Magistrate Department, the DPP's Office, the Electoral Office, Law Commission, the Land Registry, Department of Technology, Legal Aid and Advice Center, Intellectual Property, and Parliament. All departments within the ministry have resumed duty, and all staff are working on a shift system. The respective departments are adhering to the protocols as outlined in the COVID-19 regulations. That is, staff and customers must wear a face mask to enter the workplace. They have to thoroughly hand sanitize their hands, and sanitizers are mounted on the walls at the office or on a table nearby. The observance of the 6 feet distance for all customers and staff are adhered to. I would like to thank the task force for the opportunity to inform the general public on the operations of the ministry during this pandemic. For the purpose of this presentation, I will focus on the reopening of the Magistrate and High Court and the protocols that will be established during the safety of all who would access the judicial system. I will now read a circular that was sent from the High Court to the Bar Association and all legal professionals. Resumption of court hearings. On 5th March 2020, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, CARPHA, raised the risk of transmission of COVID-19 to the Caribbean region from high to very high. On 25th March 2020, the Federation reported its first case. A state of emergency was subsequently declared and emergency regulations enacted. The High Court was not immune from the disruptive impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, as its operations were suspended. No doubt, the current COVID-19 pandemic will be with us for at least the next 12 to 18 months and will continue to impact the operations of the court to some extent. Nonetheless, there is an important obligation on the courts, which perform a vital public service, to remain accessible. While it cannot be business as usual, the court has had to adapt to ensure continued delivery of justice, without which the administration of justice in St. Christopher and Nevis will grind to a halt and will result in backlogs and delays. Accordingly, the court has implemented a number of measures that are necessary to both facilitating court hearings that allow parties to fully participate while safeguarding members of the public, court users, court office staff, lawyers, and judges against COVID-19 infection. Remote hearings. The Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court has decided that all hearings in the High Court will be conducted as far as is reasonably practicable using existing technologies to conduct remote hearings as a first option. The objective is to make the remote hearing as close as possible to the usual practice in court. In-person hearings. In-person hearings are to be discouraged unless the judge determines that there is a genuine and absolute necessity for same, and it is not possible to conduct a remote hearing. Where a judge deems it fit for hearing to be conducted in person, attendance shall be limited to attorneys, parties, and necessary witnesses. In such instances, the court has devised a number of internal measures to minimize the risk associated with COVID-19. These measures include enhancing our office sanitation efforts by installing hand sanitizers at specific locations throughout our office and strictly observing physical distancing protocols. Persons exhibiting flu-like symptoms or other symptoms associated with COVID-19 will not be permitted in the court. Hearing dates. Criminal matters will resume on the 18th May 2020 in St. Christopher. Civil matters will resume in both St. Christopher and Nevis on 2nd June 2020. In Nevis, case management hearing will commence on 22nd May 2020. The court will communicate the hearing date for each matter and information relating to accessing the necessary link to the remote hearing. In the case of represented litigants or defendants, this information will be communicated to their lawyers. In the case of litigants, in-person or unrepresented defendants, the court will contact such persons directly. It is essential that in-person litigants or unrepresented defendants ensure that the court is supplied with their up-to-date contact information. Communication with the court. Should persons have any queries, they must communicate with the court via email addressed to the Registrar of the High Court. The email address is registrysKN@gov.kn. That is registrysKN@gov.kn. And in Nevis, it's nevreg@niagov.com. Or via telephone numbers 869-467-1335, that's in St. Christopher, or 869-469-0504 in Nevis. All emails must contain the following information in the subject line. A, the claim or indictment number, the claim name, the time and date of hearing. The court office will acknowledge receipt of all emails as soon as possible. And that was from the High Court. I will now speak to the Magistrate Court. Magistrate Court will resume on Monday, 18th May 2020. Court hearings require the physical presence of parties and their representatives. The challenges facing everyone involved in litigation in the courts during this period of COVID-19 pandemic are unprecedented. The Magistrate Court, as an institution, must react to the present crisis by employing new measures to facilitate its daily operations. Skeleton staff. At present, the Magistrates Court has reduced its working hours to prevent the spread of COVID-19 at the workplace. The office is open to the public for business and is manned by a skeleton staff from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday to Thursday and 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Fridays. The following measures are being employed. 1. The workplace is kept clean and hygienic throughout the workday. Surfaces of desks and computers will be wiped and disinfected periodically. Promotion of regular and thorough hand washing by employees, litigants, and representatives are employed. Posters are displayed in prominent areas to sensitize the public on the importance of hand washing and other COVID-19 preventative protocols. Preparation for trial. In preparation for trial, 1, to reduce the list to no more than 25 matters per day. This will eliminate the congestion outside the courthouse and in Independence Square. Once a criminal case is filed, the earliest court date available is assigned and the summons is issued for service. On proof that the summons was served, The case will be listed for court and only served cases will be listed. If the date is not served, a new date will be given. The District B court list will be limited to 20 matters. The District B magistrate will accommodate a maximum of 12 new matters each day, reserving the other 8 slots for trials, facts, sentencing, etc. 2. The court security will ensure that the litigants and their witnesses maintain a distance of 6 feet apart and adhere to the social distancing protocols. 3. There will be no call-overs. 4. The court office will contact the parties directly to confirm dates and availability of lawyers and new hearing arrangements, and then the list would be published. 5. The parties will be contacted by the court staff whose hearings are scheduled to appear and work our way through the list as quickly as possible. 6. The magistrate court will convey urgent matters, particularly maintenance, police and criminal, traffic prosecutions, and civil cases. 7. Priority will be given to all bail, maintenance, and custody cases. 8. Applications for domestic violence and protection orders will be dealt with as a matter of urgency. Court security. The court security is to ensure the following. 1. Everyone who enters the court building must wear a face mask or a similar protective gear. 2. Everyone entering the building must sanitize their hands with the hand sanitizer located in the entrance. 3. The bar tables, prisoner's dock, witness stand, and court seating will be sanitized on a regular basis. 4. Only clients and representatives are allowed in the courtroom at a given time. 5. All parties must wear masks when inside of the courtrooms. 6. Social distancing of at least 6 feet must be observed in the courtroom and at the bar table. 7. The courtrooms will be cleaned and sanitized daily. Bail application by written submission. Step 1. The person applying notifies the prosecutor. Step 2. The prosecutor then prepares a written summary of the allegations and indicates whether the Crown is objecting to bail or not, and given the reasons if there are objections. Step 3. The person applying prepares a written submission which would be the same as what would have presented orally to the court. Step 4. The person applying should also provide the names of 2 proposed sureties along with their address, occupation, and a copy of a government-issued ID for each, as well as a signed declaration indicating that they are aware of the responsibilities of being a surety and the possible penalties. Step 5. These documents are forwarded together to the relevant magistrate, preferably electronically. Step 6, the magistrate receives and considers the application on paper and then indicates in writing whether bail is granted or denied, along with the terms and conditions for bail or reasons for the refusal, whichever is applicable. 7, if the recordance is given, it will be prepared by the attorney or by the court clerk if applicable. If a person is unrepresented, and it is signed by all parties, submitted to the magistrate for signature. The accused is then released. And that is a summary of what will take place both in the High Court and in the Magistrate Court. And we seek the assistance and cooperation of all persons who will be using the court system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Francis, PS in the Ministry of Justice, Legal Affairs and Communications. I will now invite Deputy Chief Immigration Officer, Ms. Jacqueline Brown, to make a donation to the Ministry of Education. Ms. Brown.
Good afternoon to the listening and viewing public and to those persons present here today at the NEOC. My name is Jacqueline Brown, and as was said earlier, I'm the Deputy Chief Immigration Officer. But today, I am here in the capacity as a representative of the Carolina High School class of 1982. You see, Adeline Thompson, Dr. Wilkinson spoke about her some weeks ago.
Or 467.
She was a student of our class. And she was a nurse in New York. And she died as a result of complication of the COVID. Adeline was a selfless person. To know Adeline was to love her. You just had to love her because she was such a genuine person. Adeline was sick and we didn't even know. The last time she contributed to our chat in WhatsApp was almost 2 days or so before she died, just to wish somebody happy birthday. And we didn't even know that she was sick. Well, I didn't know. Adeline will be missed. Adeline came from a very big family, and her mother, I understand, is 96, is still alive. She had her son and 2 grandchildren. One of the grandchildren was just born in January. She will be missed by her classmates, the patients that she took care of at these 2. She worked at 2 separate medical facilities in the US. And I know that she will be missed by so many people, co-workers, her friends, her church family. And so Adeline was laid to rest this morning. And in her honor, and to remember her, we, the students of the class, Carolina High School class of 82, would like to make a donation to the fight against this COVID-19 disease. This is a check in the amount of $3,470. We would like our contribution to go specifically to the Education Department because we are aware that they will soon roll out the protocols for going back to school. And it might be that they might need PPEs, they might need masks. We don't know what they might need, but we are certain that things will be needed. The sanitizing stations and so on. And so we want to make the donation specifically to that cause. And this is the check, $3,000. $3,470 and easy. And I want to thank Mr. Samuels for allowing us to make this presentation today, and I also want to thank those of our classmates who contributed to this venture. Thank you.
Thank you. Normally I call her Jackie, but Ms. Brown, for this generous contribution of $3,470 by your classmates. Again, we keep seeing every day how our citizens are assisting us in this fight against COVID-19 in our all of society's approach. So again, thank you to Ms. Brown and her team, and also we wish the family for the deceased citizen and daughter of the soil, our condolences, and we hope that you are recovering nicely from your loss.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown. And we are seeing that while we have no deaths of nationals in St. Kitts and Nevis, that doesn't mean that we have not had any deaths of nationals at all. We've had deaths of nationals from the COVID-19 in the diaspora, in countries where it is very widespread, like the United States. We thank you very much for that donation. It was very touching. I now invite Mr. Daryl Lloyd, who is Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Youth, and Culture, to address us. Mr. Lloyd.
Good afternoon to all. Good afternoon to those who are viewing and also to those who are here with us. The Ministry of Sports is fully aware, that the recreation, and the sport are pulse of the Federation, and we are committed to ensuring the resumption of both in a very timely fashion while not compromising the health of our citizens. Here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, sports have been greatly impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. We have witnessed the cancellation and postponement of major sporting events that have caused financial setbacks for some of our sectors, sporting sectors. The effects of COVID-19 are also being felt by community sport, with teams unable to train, to play competitively, and come together socially. As a consequence, many of our professional athletes are not getting the adequate training that they are required in order to remain fit. Today, my update will be brief, of course, but most importantly, I would want to share with you what the Ministry of Sport has been doing and what we intend to do in response to COVID-19. The Ministry, of course, would like to recommend, the Ministry of Sports would like to commend all who have been adhering to the stipulations put forward by the relevant authorities so we can minimize the impact of this dreaded pandemic. In any event, our responses are based on continued engagement with stakeholders and partners of the Ministry of Sport, with the aim of providing action based on objective health information and holistic consultation. What the Ministry of Sport has been doing thus far: to date, we have identified some of the more vulnerable persons in our communities, as well as at-risk personalities who have contributed to the sporting landscape. And in short order, the Ministry of Sports will be making an effort to provide care packages to these individuals. The Ministry of Sports is pleased that a contribution of sporting accessories, particularly shoes, were given by a charitable foundation. And in short order, the Ministry of Sports will be distributing these shoes to persons who are in need. Coaches on government payroll have been actively involved in discussions aimed at charting the way forward for the Department of Sports. We recognize that it cannot be as it was, and so it is important for us to engage our coaches on the way forward. We have reached out to the step workers at the Ministry of Sports, particularly those who are coaches, to determine the way forward, the best way forward. They will also be engaged in some capacity building sessions which fall in line with the ministry's goal of personal development. We are also exploring the possibility of providing emotional support during this time. Additionally, we had a campaign to encourage the general public to stay active during the lockdown periods. The campaign featured exercise sessions with Delwayne Delaney, President of the St. Kitts and Nevis Athletic Association, and Mr. Adolphus Jones, former national athlete and professional trainer. Exercises can be accessed through St. Kitts Department of Sports Facebook page. The campaign has evolved into one where we are imploring citizens to engage in simple recreational activities in their immediate environs, whether it is through skipping, playing hopscotch, a little walking, etc., but most importantly, while demonstrating social distancing. The way forward, the Ministry of Education has engaged the National Emergency Operations Center to chart a clear path via phases for the resumption of sports and recreation in our community. Our ministry has also started the process of putting a team together, inclusive of doctors, trainers, representatives from various sporting associations and organizations, the National Olympic Committees, and other relevant personnel to create a stepwise process that ensures the safety of athletes, recreational lovers, and the wider community with the resumption of sports. I want to say, however, we are going to meet with these individuals, but we recognize that the NEOC committee has been mandated with the responsibility of rolling out activities within our society. And so whatever information is being gleaned from these sessions, we will share with the National Emergency Operations Center, and most importantly, we will be guided and wait for the way forward as mandated by the committee. The ministry is hoping to make contact numbers for coaches available to the general public, so persons can organize control sessions where they can source assistance of the coaches. These sessions must be pre-arranged, hence the providing of the coaches' contact information. We are aware that health, of course, a healthy body is critically important to fighting this COVID-19. And so the Ministry of Sport, as I would have indicated, will partner with coaches and other trained persons within the community to provide simple activities for individuals in the community. Our facilities will be assessed and actions taken to minimize risk to those who are participating in recreational or sporting activities. We believe that once this is properly rolled out as mandated by the NEOC committee, of course, it is critically important for the Ministry of Sports to pay close attention to our facilities. And so what we are going to do, we are going to ensure that we have the necessary sanitization procedures in place before we allow the resumption of sports. One of the things that would have come to the ministry's attention is that during the days when persons are given the opportunity to move around, of course, we are being reliably informed that persons have been seen at the Kim Collins Stadium walking their dogs on the track and even riding bicycles on the track. And so the ministry is going to be guided, and the ministry is going to put certain measures in place to ensure that we safeguard these facilities. Just prior to the lockdown, the ministry would have informed you, the public, through media releases, that we embarked on the creation of a national sports policy. We are in the final stages of that project, and we will be coming to you very shortly with the completed document. The National Sports Policy is designed to enhance the knowledge and practice of sports and recreational activities at all levels to create a sports culture among all, including the differently abled, to develop sports as an industry, and to strengthen sports bodies and associations with good governance practices, among other things. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been working assiduously to ensure that we improve on the foundation for a model sports brand in the region and in the world. I want to share with you a few tips that we find could be critically important, very important. Most of our meetings, because of what has happened with COVID, most of the meetings are done virtually. We are spending more time in office-bound, desk-bound positions. Please be reminded to take periodic breaks whenever possible and move away from the continuous engagement with electronic devices, your phone, your tablets, and your computers. It is also recommended that at least once every 30 minutes, wherever possible, we get up, stretch, or take a short walk. These actions are important for our overall health and well-being. Our sporting events have been cancelled for now to avoid going into crowded places. Why? Where people come together in crowds, because the entire population, of course, has not been tested. We don't know if maybe persons may be out there with certain symptoms. And so we are encouraging the population to avoid large crowds. Stay active during and after the COVID-19. Health experts have advised that this is one of the ways to keep the immune system healthy and helps to fight away the viruses. We want to encourage you to keep your mind on positive things. The mind has a way of fooling us. And I once said to someone just recently that I believe that if persons are to die, most persons may die from a spirit of fear. We want to encourage you to develop a spirit of positivity. Think on positive things. That is why you have been encouraged to listen to the relevant authorities, because we recognize that far too many persons have too many unwelcome information that could be distorted and confusing. In conclusion, we have been hearing about concerns of the possibility of a second wave of the pandemic. Our ministry wishes to take a proactive approach, but a well-informed stance to the resumption of all sporting and recreational facilities. We cannot afford to compromise the health of any of our citizens with rash decision-making. We will continue to have discussions with the NEOC committee and also knowledgeable resources in hope of making informed decisions. I want to encourage all of us to continue to practice social distancing and or avoidance if possible, and also to demonstrate the right attitude. I want to thank you for inviting the Ministry of Sports to this daily briefing and to wish you a pleasant good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lloyd, PS in Sports, Youth and Culture. I now invite Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, to give us the police report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. A pleasant good afternoon to all. I'll begin my report with the usual arrest statistics. I'm always pleased when we do not have any arrests to report. So for the last 24 hours, the number of arrests made by the police is nil. To date, the total arrests for offences under the emergency regulations remains at 133. Regulation 12.2 of the Emergency Powers Regulation empowers the St. Christopher Nevis Police and the St. Kitts and Nevis Defence Force to stop any vehicle and inquire as to the purpose for which that vehicle is being utilized, and may arrest anyone found in violation of this regulation. I read this particular regulation in the context of passenger buses carrying more passengers than they are permitted to carry under these regulations, and passengers not wearing their masks, of course not over their eyes. We again appeal to bus operators to comply with the hygiene protocols and ensure that your passengers wear their masks to cover their nose and mouth. I would again highlight the protocols that were established, the conditions of use that were established for omnibuses. There shall be no more than 2 passengers per row of seating. All persons should wear a mask at all times while on the bus, and the windows shall remain open or partially open depending on weather conditions. And all persons shall practice hand hygiene, proper sanitary behavior, and social distancing. Now, these are very simple conditions that we ask persons to apply in everything that they do. Good hand hygiene, wear your mask, keep your social distance. And so it is no different for passenger buses. We continue to get reports of persons riding on buses without masks, buses carrying in excess of the number of passengers that are permitted. We know that your vehicle would have been licensed to carry a certain number of passengers, but that particular number is now reduced under the emergency regulations, and you are required to comply with the provisions of the emergency regulations during the period of the emergency. Once the emergency is lifted, then you will revert to your original numbers that your vehicle was licensed for. But until then, you are required to comply with the provisions of these regulations and only carry 2 passengers per seat in a row. So that means most 14-seater buses would only be allowed to carry 9 passengers. We appeal to passengers, when you recognize that the bus is carrying its full complement and the driver stops to pick you up, that you refuse to enter the bus, because you might just find yourself in violation of the law should police stop the vehicle to inquire as to the position. So keep yourself safe, comply with the provisions of the regulation, hand sanitize, wear your mask, and no more than 2 persons per row. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Henry. I now invite Dr. Marissa Carty, who will give us the Health Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 Situation Report. Dr. Carty.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good evening to everyone. Today, May 14th, the World Health Organization reports 4,258,666 confirmed cases of COVID-19, with 294,190 deaths. In the Federation, we've sampled and tested a total of 386 persons. 319 persons were confirmed negative, 15 were confirmed positive, and 52 results are pending. Of the 15 positive cases, 14 persons have recovered and there has been 0 deaths. A total of 54 persons remain in quarantine, 52 in a government facility, while 2 persons are quarantined at home. 1 person remains in isolation and is recovering. To date, 760 persons have been released from quarantine. We are currently at day 25 without a new case. The Ministry of Health would like to take this opportunity to inform the general public that regular clinic services are available at all health centers throughout the island. These services are provided during the morning hours from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and include antenatal and postnatal clinics, chronic disease clinics for diabetes and hypertension, child health clinic, which includes vaccination, and family planning. Please contact the center in your district to receive the daily schedule. I encourage you to continue to adhere to all safety guidelines, including wearing your masks in public, sanitizing your hands regularly, and practicing physical distancing of at least 6 feet between persons. Your actions thus far have helped to contain the first wave of this pandemic. Remember, maintaining the overall health of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis continues to be our individual and collective responsibility. These national statistics, as well as any other COVID-related information, can be found at our website, www.covid.gov.kn, as well as on our health promotion Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram pages. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carty. I now invite Mr. Abdias Samuel, who is chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force, to address us. Mr. Samuel.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and good afternoon to all our listeners, all our viewers, both on internet and television. I want to start today by acknowledging the continuous support of generous associations and also citizens. The St. Kitts Flower Arrangement Association would like to express our heartfelt solidarity with you during these tense and troubling times. We appreciate the work done by the task force in keeping the people of our federation safe. To this end, we hereby donate the sum of $1,500 towards the Carding Home. Thank you for your leadership in the fight against the spread of COVID-19 in our federation. Sincerely, Sharon A. Drew, President, St. Kitts Flower Association. I also want to subsequently acknowledge Ms. France Ann Satney for donating some treats to the students who are in quarantine. By all accounts, the students have received their treats and they are extremely happy. Today, while on the topic of the students who would have returned from Jamaica who are in quarantine, they were tested today, and both in St. Kitts and in Nevis, and we should expect results shortly. The students are in very good spirit, and they are definitely excited to go home soon. However, I think they have enjoyed themselves in quarantine. Today, we had a very important meeting. The task force would have had a very important meeting with the faith-based church leaders on St. Kitts and on Nevis. Those on Nevis would have joined us virtually, thanks to the good works of John James, who would have connected us. A wonderful technician he is, yeah? And the discussion was very fruitful. I think we made a lot of headway in terms of ensuring that our clergies were involved in the discussions as to how do we reopen or we reopen the churches to resume service. I was delighted by the contributions made, some of the concerns that were brought to our attention, and it has positioned us better to be able to develop the guidelines that would now be taken forward for us to be able to legislate the way the churches will function and operate during this pandemic. So I want to thank Pastor Canon P. Rollins and also Reverend Leroy Matthews from the Evangelical Association and the Christian Council for guiding this process. I also want to thank Pastor Connor, right there, our neighbor, Antioch Baptist Church, for allowing us to use such a marvelous facility. We were able to demonstrate using the facility as to how the new norm would look. This event was very well attended, in my opinion. I think I counted over 50 pastors we had present at the facility, and then we had a number of persons that would have joined us online, virtually, from St. Kitts, but in particularly, we had Nevis in the discussion, and that to us was very important. So we are doing an all-inclusive approach to this process, and we will continue to do so. Yesterday, I would have mentioned that the golf course is a private property, so to speak. However, I was further advised that it's a joint venture company with the Royal Golf Course and the Frigate Bay Development Corporation, in which this agreement would have begun back in 1997. So therefore, it's a joint venture company, and I attempted to find out some information as to the concern that was raised, but I will be receiving a further update so I can update you. The Compliance Task Force continues their work in ensuring that the businesses are compliant and adapting to the new norm of social and physical distancing. Today, they would have visited a total of 44 business places or enterprises and would have engaged a total of 5 buses, passenger buses. While we are on the buses, I want to highlight something to the buses because we keep getting a lot of complaints about the buses. It's either the situation of overloading and also not wearing masks. Section 16, exemption for days of limited operation, subsection 8 says, A, there is not more than 2 passengers per row of seating. B, all persons wear a mask at all times pursuant to regulation 15. Windows remain open or partially open depending on the weather condition. D, all persons should practice good hand hygiene, proper sanitary behavior, and social distancing protocol. These are 4 simple steps that we are asking the bus drivers. They complained at first because at first we said 4 passengers. It was reviewed. We were making progress. The restriction was gradually reduced. We took it to 2 passengers per row, including the front row. To date, citizens are complaining that these buses are not compliant. Let me remind you that the penalty for contravening these regulations are a fine not exceeding $5,000 or imprisonment not exceeding 6 months or both, and to forfeiture of any goods or money in respect of which the offense has been committed. I'm asking all in these trying times and hard times, I can't lose $5,000. I don't know about you. I don't want to go to jail for 6 months, not in a pandemic time. Okay? So I'm asking all bus drivers, taxi operators, and everyone who deals with public transport to please comply. Help us with the fight against the COVID-19. You have a role to play. It's all of society's involvement and approach. With that said, we will welcome your questions, and if I forget anything of any of the acknowledgement, I will ask Leslie to read it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. And we have now come to the question and answer segment. To start the ball rolling, this question is for Dr. Wilkinson, our Medical Chief of Staff. Dr. Wilkinson, I learned today that 2 soldiers from the USS Roosevelt who were deemed recovered with 2 negative tests and returned to aircraft carrier have tested positive again, and there is now another outbreak of COVID-19 on the ship. Should I be concerned about our recovered cases and they causing a secondary outbreak? Dr. Wilkinson.
Covered after they have 2 negative tests 3 days after being symptom-free. Here, out of an abundance of caution, we deem our patients recovered after they've been symptom-free for 14 days and have 2 consecutive negative tests. And these consecutive negative tests are not necessarily 24 hours apart, because we always wait for the first test that comes back negative before we run the second test. And so sometimes the second test can be a couple days after the first negative test. And so when someone is deemed recovered here, they're definitely deemed recovered. Now, as it relates to the Theodore Roosevelt aircraft, yes, I saw the article about the 2 soldiers who retested positive and that there's an outbreak again, but there's no evidence to suggest that it was those 2 soldiers who tested positive who were the ones who were spreading the disease. And we said in an earlier broadcast that someone can test positive after testing negative for a number of reasons. Number one, it could be just the dead viral particles that a very sensitive test is picking up. And the evidence for that is when they tried to culture or incubate the virus from these samples, they were unable to because they were really dead viral particles. 2, the test could have been compromised, and so there was a problem with the testing. And 3, it could have been someone who was immunocompromised in some way such that the virus was reactivated. We don't think as yet, the evidence is not there as yet that one can get COVID-19 twice. And so I can tell you conclusively that our patients, the CMO said that the time to recovery was about 30 days. I think that's what she said the other day. And it doesn't necessarily mean that our patients are sick for 30 days, but because of the very stringent policy we have in place before we declare somebody recovered, I can tell you that the persons who were deemed recovered, they're free to mingle in society, and there should be no fear at all of any secondary infections from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilkinson. I will invite the Honorable Wendy Phipps to reiterate a point that has been made a few times. The question is, if other Caribbean countries' airports are open and Leah is flying, would it be allowed to pick up passengers in St. Kitts who want to leave? I am in St. Kitts, got stuck in St. Kitts, and have a job to return to in the Virgin Islands. I'm sure I'm not alone. Why won't people who want to leave can't leave if the country they are going to is welcoming them and accepting them?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for that question. To be clear, and you're so right in indicating that it is a question that has been posed several times, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, inasmuch as our borders remain closed, have never stopped the departure for purposes of repatriation from anyone who is in the Federation and who is leaving the country. To be precise, there have been several flights, some of them by seaborne, that would have come in as recently as last week, if my memory is correct, to extract Ross University students so that they can get back to their hometowns in the United States via connecting flights out of Puerto Rico. Having said that, in the example that you gave, using the LIAT scenario, if it's a case where LIAT is attempting to do an island hopping route to pick up people who it deems stranded, including from St. Kitts and Nevis, that modality will not be accepted here, because that would mean then that LIAT is operating a commercial pick-up and drop-off service. If, on the other hand, whoever these people are in St. Kitts, because he says there are, or she, whoever that person is suggesting there are others in the same boat that he or she may be in, and they are able to arrange a special charter to leave the Federation, they just need to arrange that with the NEOC Task Force, Port Health Services, SCASPA, the Airport General Manager, and the Head of Immigration. And once everything is in order, the group or the individual, whatever is the case, will be allowed to leave the Federation, because we would be happy for them to be returned to their homeland.
Thank you, Minister Phipps, for re-emphasizing that several times. This question is for the Ministry of Sport. What's the recommendation for sports like football? Any suggestions for the way forward?
Thank you so very much for that question. As I would have stated in my presentation, that the Ministry of Sports will be guided by the NEOC Organization Committee in relation to the rollout of sporting activities. Definitely, we will not jump ahead of the individual or the organization that has the authority to mandate when things should be rolled out. And so, as long as we are comfortably satisfied in working with the NEOC organization, the Ministry of Sports, along with the NEOC organization, will make the relevant statement as to when we will be able to at least begin the resumption of whatever sporting activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. This question is for Dr. Wilkinson. Dr. Wilkinson, is doing temperature checks before entering businesses effective in stopping the transmission of COVID-19? We never used them at the airports initially to prevent the importation of the virus. Why use them now?
The short answer to the question, just doing temperature checks alone is not sufficient to control the spread of COVID-19, because doing a temperature check will only pick up someone who has a fever, and we would be assuming that the person who has the fever has COVID-19, and someone can have COVID-19 and not have a fever, or doing the temperature checks will only pick up persons who have COVID-19 with a fever. It will, however, miss persons who are pre-symptomatic, that is, have the infection but don't have any symptoms as yet, or persons who are asymptomatic but have the infection, and these two persons could also be spreading the virus. We can also have persons who can suppress their temperature by taking paracetamol and other drugs to control their temperature. So they could know that they have a fever, they're going out, they take 2 paracetamol, and they go to the business place and their temperature might be normal. we also know too that one just doesn't have a fever burning up for 24 hours. Sometimes fevers come in spikes and troughs, and so they can go out when they have a drop in their temperature. So just doing the temperature checks alone will not be sufficient, and that is why we speak about the other important things in terms of the social distancing, saying 6 feet apart, wearing your mask, hand sanitizing, etc. And so I'm pretty certain that businesses will incorporate all of those things into their protocol when they're determining who comes into their business. The other important point to be made here, though, is not just enough to turn somebody back with a fever, because if we are saying that you're turning them back because they have a fever and they might have COVID-19, it's your responsibility also to refer them on to a health authority or to a doctor or their private physician so that they can be properly evaluated to make sure that they don't spread the virus. Thank you.
I would invite Mr. Samuel to address this question. Why is it so difficult to come to a decision in opening the churches?
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Williams, and the person who asked the question. The main objective for us within the task force is to save life. That's the main objective. We want to ensure that when we take the responsibility for these institutions to open, we want to make sure that they do so within a particular protocol or methodology or process whereby the congregants along with the preachers are protected. So therefore, we want to make sure that we put the necessary processes in place and everyone is able to be practical in worshiping. So that is why the reason that we are taking our time to ensure that when we do so effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel, for that response. From my understanding of theology, I know that going to church does not necessarily affect your relationship with God. Neither does it prevent you from praying. This question is for the Attorney General. Why are government offices and FSRC closed to the public at 12? Service providers have to pay significant sums to FSRC, and their offices are still only open for 3 hours daily. Why is it still necessary for the significantly reduced hours?
Thank you very much, Lesroy. There are a lot of government departments across our country, and different departments have made their own individual arrangements during this period of partial curfew. And as we open up, government departments will adjust. In some cases, you have some offices who schedule their staff at different times in shifts. So on one day, half their staff might work, another day at different half, so as to try and accommodate our new normal, where we don't want to be crowded in small offices as we may have done in the past. I cannot say exactly why such offices as the FSRC or others may stop at 12, in some cases to go to 4 or 2. So there are different arrangements. But if you are aware that the office you want to go to has an earlier closing time, I'm sure you can make the necessary adjustments that you can. Maybe you should call ahead and make an appointment if necessary, but we are trying to adjust and get it right. And as we go forward, we'll have to review those hours if it is inconvenient for them to close at 12. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. This question, again, is for Dr. Wilkinson. Dr. Wilkinson, yesterday you spoke of the importance of sunlight and vitamin D levels and COVID-19 severity. How long do I need to stay in the sun to make enough vitamin D?
Thank you, Leslie. Just before I answer that question, I just want to say something about the question that was posed about playing soccer or football. Because just the other day, a gentleman approached me also and he asked me, why can't we start playing football or soccer? He can put on a mask and they can play. And I reminded him that he was the same person who was telling me that he could not exercise in a mask. And so one can't have their cake and eat it at the same time. And we have to understand that soccer is a contact sport. You are going to be in front of people's face, breathing deeply, etc. And until we get this virus controlled, we cannot be indulging in those kind of close activities where you can't exercise social distancing. Now, the question was about how long you need to stay in the sun. Most studies have shown that 30 minutes in the midday sun is sufficient for one to make enough vitamin D, 30 minutes at least 3 times a week. And this is the recommendation mainly for countries that are north and south of the equator. But for most persons who live in a very tropical climate, just the time you spend walking back and forth within the sun, that should be sufficient for you. The thing is, though, paradoxically, persons who are dark-skinned, because they have more melanin, and the melanin acts as a sunscreen, these persons have to spend more time than persons who are light-skinned or Caucasians to make the same amount of vitamin D. And it's thought that whereas a Caucasian or a very light-skinned person might need to spend 30 minutes in the sun to make the required amount of vitamin D, a dark-skinned person would have to spend up to 3 hours to make the same amount of vitamin D because of the melanin protection that acts as a sunscreen. I see the Attorney General smiling there, so you need to spend more time sunbathing, Mr. Hyman. Okay.
There are 2 questions here. The first one, if someone has a shop and they live next door to the shop, can't they close their shop at 7:50 p.m., then go home? I can answer that one. And that one is that the regulation states that the shop should close at 6. Huh? A recommendation that the shops close at 6. But can they open until 7:50? The closure of the curfew is 8 o'clock. So the advice from the learned Attorney General is that the shop could be open until 7:50 p.m., but you can't be on the street after 8. And the customers as well. So if you have a shop in Molyneux and your customer is from Otley's or Keon, then will that person get home in time? That person won't get home in time. It will take more than 10 minutes, and they probably will have to get bus or walk. If they walk it, they certainly won't. That's why the recommendation is to close earlier so that people can get home before the curfew starts. This question is for Dr. Laws. How long after the last confirmed case is recovered, can we fully open back the country, except for the borders?
All right, I think we are at 24, 25 days since we would have announced our last case. However, I want us to note that we still have persons being tested. So for example, I think we would have tested the students who were repatriated, and so we have to await their results, and we still have some suspected cases who we are testing. So the full opening back of the country is dependent on a number of factors. And yes, waiting 2+ incubation periods after our last case is one of the factors, but we need to look at other factors. For example, our testing of suspected cases. Are we seeing persons in our emergency rooms, etc.? And we still need to recognize that going forward, we are still not out of the woods. There is the science telling us that there's going to be a second curve, and so we cannot go back to life as usual. We still have to continue the physical distancing, the social distancing, and we still have to monitor and put things in place to ensure this. And so it cannot be that we go back to life as usual. And as you rightly say, we also need to keep our borders closed at this time, because if you open your borders, you will be, persons will be coming in from hotspots or countries whereby the outbreak is even worse than our own. And so that too will be a signal for the start of a second curve. Thank you.
We keep getting a lot of frequent questions on the opening of bars. It's a frequent question. This question states that why it is that churches are being given the opportunity to reopen and bars are not given the opportunity to reopen. I can answer that is not the same spirit, but I would invite Mr. Samuel to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for the question, and thanks for the question. I think it's a valuable question. Mr. Williams seems to have risen the spirits in the room. However, the reality is that, as Dr. Laws keeps saying and Dr. Wilkinson keeps saying, is that we are taking gradual processes in opening up the country. We are still not out of the woods. So therefore, as we continue to ease the restrictions and make this gradual process to get in the country to reopen, we will be revisiting all the sectors. So there are other sectors too. For example, you have the sports, yes, you have the bars, yes, you have the churches. So therefore, we're going in it's a gradual process. So we will get there. Don't worry, we will get there. Take your time. So that's why.
And this is our last question for the day. Are there particular requirements persons have to meet in order to work from home if they're employed by statutory bodies or government corporations. Attorney General.
Thanks. It depends on the particular government department. In Regulation 5, I think it is, the Cabinet Secretary is given the authority to designate which particular public official should be able to work on lockdowns on other days when they're not normal openings. What has been happening is that between the Cabinet Secretary and she has been working with the Chief Personnel Officer in the government service, is that you can determine whether a department should go for 4 hours, 6 hours, 8 hours. We have recommended that those older public servants or those who have chronic underlying conditions should be given preference to try and work from home, so that if there is an incidence of the spread or transmission of COVID, they may not succumb to those conditions. We have determined, as I said earlier, that you don't want cramped offices, so physical distancing should be very important in a determination as to how offices should be staffed. And the general principle that has been encouraged is to try and have from home. In the Attorney General's chambers, for instance, we have attorneys at law who can access their matters via the cloud online, and so they can do their research and other duties while at home, for instance. There would be times when they have to come to the office. There may well be times when they have to have an in-person interview with witnesses and others. Certain other types of jobs require you to enter data into a secure computer station that requires you to go for security reasons to your office, and so you may not work from home. It depends, as I say, depending on the nature of your work, and depends on the spacing in your office and the importance of what you do. We find, for instance, that the Treasury may close at 1 o'clock to the general public, but officers still work behind the scenes to tie off their jobs till maybe 3. Many of them come out on lockdown days to prepare payrolls and other stuff. So there's no one set of rules that you want to establish. It depends on the various requirements of your government department, statutory body, or organization. And these have to be carefully thought through as we settle, as it is, into the new way of us doing business. We have to provide services for the general public. We have to provide whatever it is we have to do in our organization to make us continue the work of economic life of our country while we try to adjust and not assist in the spread or transmission of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney General. That brings us to the end of our question and answer segment for today. Thank you very much for your questions. I have 2 announcements. The first one is from the Department of Agriculture in St. Kitts. The Department of Agriculture wishes to inform that the abattoir will reopen to receive animals on Sundays only, starting this Sunday, May 17th, 2020, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 12 noon. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it will not be business as usual, as no one will be allowed to show up at the abattoir with animals for slaughter without prior permission. Instead, livestock farmers and traders interested in the services of the abattoir must call the abattoir at 465-7938. That is 465-7938, between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. to give details of the number and species of animals they wish to have slaughtered. However, based on the advice of the Ministry of Health, only a limited number of animals can be slaughtered at any one time. Please note carefully that only the persons who call and get permission from the abattoir will be allowed on the road by the police and allowed to leave their animals at the abattoir. Farmers and traders are asked to be guided accordingly. And the second announcement has to do with the Commonwealth of Learning. The Commonwealth of Learning has joined hands with Coursera and the recently announced Coursera Workforce Recovery Initiative as an immediate solution to the challenges of unemployment and job losses faced by people due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Commonwealth of Learning has undertaken to facilitate access to a suite of 3,800 courses in 400 specializations among unemployed citizens of Commonwealth member states. St. Kitts and Nevis has been offered 50 licenses to enroll individuals who are willing to learn a new skill or upgrade their existing skills. The individuals who are interested can contact Mr. Francil Morris, Deputy Chief Education Officer Acting, at Francil Morris, FRANCIL.MORRIS at moeskn.org. I repeat that, FRANCIL.MORRIS at moeskn.org. Or they can call 467-1414 for further information on or before May 29, 2020, so that the Commonwealth of Learning can send the formal invitation to join the courses. So those were our two announcements. I want to thank very much Mr. Daryl Lloyd, who is the Permanent Secretary Acting in the Ministry of Sports, Youth and Culture, for his presentation on sports and the importance of sports to keep us healthy and fit. Also, Ms. Diana Francis, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Justice, Legal Affairs, and Communication. I guess with the courts and so on, we probably with the COVID-19 have less crime. So there should be less use of the courts. Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, Thank you, Superintendent Cromwell Henry, and for clearing up that the mask should not be worn over the eyes. We also thank Dr. Marissa Carty for giving the Health Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 situation report, and Mr. Abdias Samuel, chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force. We thank all of them for their presentations. We also thank the Honorable Attorney General for his input, and the Honorable Wendy Phipps, Minister of State with responsibility of health, and also the person who answered most of the medical questions today, the Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, and we thank our Chief Medical Officer as well, Dr. Hazel Laws. We also thank the media, of course, ZIZ, Open Interactive, and all the media here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Caribbean Broadcasting Network in the British Virgin Islands, who continues to partner with us in bringing these briefings live. We thank all of you who joined us today via television, via radio, or via social media. We continue to update you and to inform you with what is happening with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic and the management of it in St. Kitts and Nevis. Tomorrow we'll be back for another COVID-19 daily briefing. Until then, take care and stay safe.
Before touching the mask, clean hands with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. Take the mask and inspect it for tears or holes. Orient which side is the top side, where the metal strip is. Ensure the proper side of the mask faces outwards, the colored side. Place the mask to your face. Pinch the metal strip or stiff edge of the mask so it molds to the shape of your nose. Pull down the mask's bottom so it covers your mouth and your chin. After use, take off the mask. Remove the elastic loops from behind the ears while keeping the mask away from your face and clothes. To avoid touching potentially contaminated surfaces of the mask, discard the mask in a closed bin immediately after use.
Many people's
is on.